Hi, my name is Zoe Schmitz. I'm an Events and Programming Coordinator here at the Ankeny Chamber of Commerce, and today I'm joined by Eric Summers with TeamLogic and Mark Densmore with Densmore Insurance Strategies. Today our Business Illumination series will be covering cybersecurity and cyber insurance and how organizations can protect themselves. I will have our panelists give a quick introduction of themselves and a craziest story regarding cybersecurity.
Thanks, Zoe. First, I'd like to thank the Ankeny Chamber for having us here. My name is Eric Summers. I'm the president and owner of TeamLogic IT here in Ankeny, Iowa. We've been around for 7 years, and we do IT and cybersecurity services for businesses throughout the state of Iowa. Crazy IT or cybersecurity story. So one of the products that we use for our clients to help protect them is we actually monitor the dark web for the presence of lost or stolen credentials out there. So one time we were giving a presentation to a prospect, and there were 3 gentlemen in the room. And as I was getting to the part of the dark web feature that we do, we always present a table of the results because we do a quick scan of the dark web for anybody in the room or for our potential prospects in case there's anything out there. So I threw up the table on the slide, and all of a sudden the controller who was running the meeting in the room, he actually asked me to stop the meeting. And we paused the meeting, and he said he'd be back in about 10 to 15 minutes, and which I thought was kind of weird. And so he did that, and he paused, he left the room. He came back 10 to 15 minutes later, we finished the meeting, but then he pulled me aside after the meeting, and he said, you know, the reason I stopped the meeting is that one of the credentials you threw up there was actually the owner's password and username that he uses for work, because I keep it and maintain it for him. And so I had to go run and have him change it, like, right away. So, sometimes these tools that we use can sound kind of corny or kind of funny, but they actually do work. So that's a recent one that happened within the last year. So it was kind of funny how the controller running out of the room, and coming to find out later he actually had the owner change his password because he actually maintained it for him. So,
hello, my name is Mark Densmore with Densmore Insurance Strategies, and I too want to thank the Chamber for doing this and bringing heightened awareness to cybersecurity and insurance protection. Craziest story, I've been in business for 9 years, and probably within the first couple years was probably my first claim when a customer called me on the July 4th weekend. I was outside kiddie pool, my son was splashing in the water, and he said, Mark, we have an issue, something's going on. So we called the 800 number, got a breach specialist set up with them, and went through the process. And it was on a Saturday. On Monday, the specialist had flown in from out of state, took copies of everything that they needed, went back to their lab, and realized that there was a email from a former employee that never got shut off, and got compromised, and it was getting spammed, and one of the, I guess, viruses or whatnot was trying to collect and steal a bunch of data on there. And so that was a panic, you know, being my first claim too, but for the customer as well too. He wasn't sure what was going on, but we were able to get it resolved and make sure that no data had been compromised at the end of the day.
Awesome.
over the 4th of July. It's always
Over the 4th of July. It's like, wait a minute.
good time for that to happen.
Awesome. Alrighty, before we get started in our first questions, I'd like to thank TeamLogic for being our presenting sponsor today. So our first question is, what are the current trends in cybersecurity, and what measures should organizations take to protect themselves?
So that's a lot. So what we've seen, and it's over the last several years now, in terms of like compromises, cyber attacks or breaches for businesses that we assist or that we hear about. The prevalent one is it's an email, or what they call business email compromise, or BEC. That's where a business email gets compromised, usually through some sort of a phishing attack, where they're targeting either specific users at an organization. Typically, they'll be an executive owner or somebody in the financial area, like a CFO or controller. They'll get a hold of their account, get access to their account, and a common tactic is once they have access, they'll start to redirect emails. And so they'll redirect emails into folders that you normally wouldn't look at. Like there's a folder in your Outlook called RSS feeds. There's something called archive. They'll actually start redirecting certain emails that may come from the bank, may come from certain clients, and they redirect those emails to that folder, and they start to have email conversations with your clients or with your bank posing as yourself, posing as that person who's been compromised to try to basically redirect funds into their accounts. Unfortunately, it's a very successful tactic. We have several examples where that have occurred, where money has been wired or sent out when it shouldn't have been. So email's always number one. So 90+% of all cyber attacks usually occur with some sort of email compromise. The second one, there's a lot of social engineering going on. So we always caution our clients, especially the executives, to be careful what they're posting on the social media feeds, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook, Instagram, any of those. Hackers will look at that on a very regular basis to try to pick up any bits of information they can use to try to do some sort of business email compromise. So they're always trying to gather intelligence on anything you post out in the public domain. The last one that we see is sometimes we see instances of where people are using outdated software or outdated computers that haven't been patched, and those have vulnerabilities in them. There's a reason why Microsoft releases patches every Tuesday of the second Tuesday of every month, Patch Tuesday. They're always finding or discovering new vulnerabilities out there in their software. Those vulnerabilities can be exploited by the attackers, and that can lead to a network intrusion or network attack, and possibly lead to ransomware, which is one of the worst forms of cyber attacks you can have out there. Again, with respect to what you can do to mitigate that, we always tell our clients, turn on multi-factor authentication. Even if it's a pain in the butt, put MFA on any and all systems that you can, especially your email, and if you're doing any remote connections to your office network, make sure you have multi-factor authentication enabled on that. Those are the two common vectors that cyber attackers will use to try to attack your organization. And I think Mark will talk about it. I think those also, from an insurance standpoint, those are the two big areas where MFA I think is almost required anymore if you want to have any sort of cyber insurance, is on your email and your VPN. The next one is training. It's always train your folks, whether it's phishing tests or security awareness training videos, and do that on a regular basis just to keep them up to speed and keep their skills sharp when it comes to recognizing any sort of cyber attacks or any sort of potential phishing emails out there. The next one would be backups, right? Always make sure you have good backups in all your systems. Make sure you verify those backups. If you have any critical business data out there, make sure you have backups, make sure the backups are good, and make sure they've been tested. That could save a lot of heartache and a lot of dollars down the road in case the worst case attack happens. So, and the last thing would just be keep your software updated, keep your computers updated, make sure those things are always fully patched, and so you can minimize the chance that any sort of attack is going to occur through that channel. So,
awesome. Now that we can start to understand kind of the measures to take, how can employees and organizations kind of train each other to stay ahead of those?
Is that my question or Mark's?
Kind of both of you, I feel like.
Do you want to go?
Training employees. Well, I was going to touch on the email, the business email compromise. From an insurance standpoint as well too, many policies will not cover it if you bolt it on to your general liability, because it's not a widely common coverage, and your standard general liability, property insurance, work comp does not cover cyber liability. So the business email compromise, you have to get a more robust cyber insurance policy to cover that. And we had a case in point where a customer did have that email compromise, and an email was sent out to one of their customers without their knowledge asking for money. Oh, we changed our banking account information, and we'd like you to send it to this place. And so the customer received it, made payment, and then a few days later, they received it again. They're like, oh, we made payment, we'll do it again. And so that became an issue as well too, pointing fingers. Whose responsibility is that? Is it the compromised email from the originating, or is it the end user who was tricked? So who's responsible for that? So majority of cyber policies won't cover that. So that becomes an issue as well too, that you need to audit with your insurance professional too, that if you're concerned about that, otherwise you're self-insuring it. And that could be a big chunk out of your pocket as well too. And then to your point of multi-factor authentication, I just want to reiterate, the insurance companies have gotten to the point that claims have been on the rise so much that applications are like, that's a mandatory deal. It's like, if you don't have it, you can't even get the coverage. So that's something you got to heavily consider is like, okay, do we want the coverage? Then we have to set up multi-factor authentication on all of our endpoints. And if you need help with that, a lot of times they have an IT person that's assigned to that insurance company that's getting you set up that can go through and we talked about earlier, from an underwriting perspective, they can't advise you what to do, what not to do, because they're not trained to do that. From an IT perspective, it's really important to go through and make sure that they've got that. You can say you've got it, but unless an IT person actually validates that, you may not have it. So on all of your aspects as well too.
So our final cybersecurity question is on effective response plans and the type of incident design plan that organizations can have for future attacks and what that looks like kind of in a broad spectrum.
Yeah, this get pretty detailed.
Yeah.
I guess the first thing I would say with incident response plans is to, if you're on the executive team, something you may want to talk about in a strategic planning session, if we do strategic planning, is do we have an incident response plan? If we don't, we should have one in place. So an incident response plan can be made up of several parts. One of the parts that needs to be in there is, well, what if we have kind of a worst case scenario attack, cyber attack, where none of our systems are current systems that we use for production are available to us. And so first thing is to make sure you have that team built, you design a team, or you have to, you designate people in the company that have certain parts that play certain roles on this team, and they're your incident response team. You need to have that defined, who those people are. And so when that situation does occur, you automatically know these people need to get together and figure out what the next steps are. What we tell our clients is that if you feel like you have an incident, is you get a hold of us, being your IT service provider, right away. We'll help you evaluate if we need to. First thing, we'll try to isolate the systems to make sure that it doesn't spread if it is a real cyber attack. The second thing is we'll work with you or help our clients determine if we need to contact any sort of law enforcement or legal entities on this. And the third thing is we probably will want you to get into contact with your insurance company to help determine what the next best steps are if it is a significant enough cyber attack. So depending on the level of the cyber attack or cyber breach, the response is going to vary. So another key thing with the plan, so you have your team, you know who to contact when you have an incident, and then the next thing is to test it. And so you can have a plan, but if you don't actually do any sort of testing on any sort of periodic basis, and we recommend at least annually, it's still going to be pretty rough when you actually have something do occur where you have to implement the plan. So designate a team internally, come up with a basic process of who to contact when something occurs, and then 3, actually test that plan on a periodic basis.
Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just reinforcing that team aspect as well too, and the contact points, because phone calls and reaching out to somebody right away when you've got an incident, your IT company, absolutely first one to bring them in as quickly as possible. And then insurance company as well too. If you've got an insurance policy, a lot of times they have an 800 number built right into there. You need to know who you're contacting, what's that number, and then communicate that to your team. So if somebody's gone, somebody's sick, out of the office on vacation, then there's not panic. That's really important too.
Because it'll happen over the 4th of July.
Exactly.
That is actually a common thing. A lot of the major attacks you see in the media actually do occur over holidays, over U.S. holidays specifically, because that's when the IT security teams are usually at their lowest staffing levels. That's when we're usually at our most lax from an awareness standpoint, is usually over those holidays. And so a lot of the major attacks that have occurred in recent time have been over holidays, whether it's the 4th of July, Memorial Day, or any of the major holidays that are out there. So.
Alrighty, so now we've went over cybersecurity. We're going to jump right into cyber insurance and get some input from Mark. First question is there's power in knowing the ways that you can protect yourself and your data and your employees. What is cyber insurance and what does it cover, and how does it typically work?
You bet. It's primarily an emergency response tool. Liability component is important, but ultimately it's secondary to your IT services. It covers first-party liability insurance of a cyber attack. So if it happens to you, that's first party. as well as having risk management company at their hands to help with if they have an attack. Coverages include first party, as I mentioned too, if it happens to you, or third party. If it happens to one of your vendors and it affects you, that's kind of a secondary result that can financially impact you. So if you rely heavily upon an online service and they got attacked and you can't operate, well, that's third party. And hopefully they have something to cover theirs, but it doesn't cover yours. And a lot of people I've heard of, their excuse in the last 9 years is, oh, they have insurance, they'll cover me. No, your policy covers you and only you, and their policy covers them and only them. But there can be some fallout of those liabilities and secondary coverages. Social engineering, business income to hardware and ransomware. So your hardware could be compromised and you have to replace that. That's a physical asset that is not covered by your property insurance. They'll have a cyber exclusion on your property insurance for that. So that would be covered under your cyber liability. It also includes ransom negotiation, ransom payment if needed, and resulting lawsuits, and a lot more.
I think from our perspective, we always encourage our clients to have cyber insurance. So that's one of the questions we ask as we onboard a new client is, okay, what's your insurance coverage look like specifically with respect to like cyber attacks? And if they don't have a separate cyber policy, we encourage them to go out and get that policy. And then we follow up that with when you get handed the questionnaire. And Mark will tell you the questionnaire has changed a lot in the last couple of years. It's much more detailed now, a lot more questions. Don't just try to answer the questions yourselves. If you have any questions, on the technical aspects of the questions on the questionnaire, please bring us in and make sure that you are doing the things that they're asking you to do before you sign off and attest that, yes, we are doing all these things, because it'll save you a lot of pain or headaches down the road if you ever do have to file a claim on that policy. So.
They bring up a good point on the application as well too. Typically, on companies that have multiple departments as well too, they're handing the application off, okay, here's IT questions, we're giving it to our IT guy. Here's our operation guy. Or on procedures, we're giving it to that person. And then financial questions will go to the CFO, controller, accountant as well. So it's a team aspect of even filling out the application. But yeah.
I think you'd say that like 5 years ago, that application was like, what, half page maybe? Maybe a page, but now we're up to like 3, 4, 5 pages, multiple questions, and they get
half a dozen pages.
Yeah, you get pretty technical, you get pretty detailed now what they're asking for. So.
Well, now that we know a little more about cyber insurance, in the event of an attack, how does like the process of filing a claim, let's say for like a small business, like kind of honing in on a specific organization, like how would they go through that?
Yeah, certainly if you have a policy in force, filing a claim, hopefully they have a 24-hour hotline. That's the ideal situation. To call them and say, okay, what do I do next? And then they are trained to know all the different state laws that you work in, because every state has its own laws and regulations. Like in Iowa, the specific, I think it's still 500 records. If you've got that breached, which could be 100 people with 5 different points. Social security number, credit card number, birth date, first initial, last name, could be email address. So it really doesn't take that much. Then you're required to notify everybody, all of your clients, whether they're current, former, or whatever, and offer them, what is it, up to 2 years? Or is it just 1 year in Iowa?
I remember it was 1 or 2.
I think it might, at least 1 year of credit monitoring.
Do you have to notify the Attorney General too? The state Attorney General? I can't remember.
I'm not sure if it's Attorney General, but certainly you have to offer that to, and you have to pay for it. So if you don't have insurance, then you have to pay for it out of your own pocket. If you do have insurance, that's typically, and you have to look at your own policy, a covered aspect of that as well. From the 800 number, 24-hour hotline, the concierge to assist you with everything after that moment. They'll quarterback things to help you out with, breach counsel, additional vendors as needed for notification, such, forensics as well too. They'll work with your IT company. PR, so if you're a large enough company and you can't contact everybody, you're required to go on, the radio and or TV and just broadcast that. And so you're going to need a broadcasting team to do that. And they have that tool and resource. Data restoration, threat negotiation. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. And doing that yourself, it would just be overwhelming. So.
And finally, how does cybersecurity insurance differ from traditional insurance, and how can businesses benefit from having cybersecurity insurance?
You bet. Absolutely. The main thing to remember is cyber liability insurance is not covered by your other insurance products. And general liability covers business interruption, but not business interruption resulting from a cyber claim. So there's a hole there. Crime fidelity covers theft, but if it's a cyber crime type of theft, it's not covered. Property might cover hardware, but what if it was computer rendered useless during a cyber crash or cyber breach? Cyber offers unique coverage triggers to pick up all of this, where the other policies will fall short. And so companies are coming out with more and more exclusions over the past few years. If it's breached that veil of they didn't intend it to cover anyway, they're clarifying that and sending notifications to their policyholders and saying, hey, we didn't intend to cover this, but here's a statement, a notice that further clarifies that it's not covered by this policy. So you really need to get a cyber liability policy. And also note, it's board level issue. I mean, if you got a board of directors, it must be a priority at the highest level of the company, leadership level, to have proper security and safeguards for, customer, vendor, prospect, and employee information. So,
in your guys' opinion, how has AI, artificial intelligence, kind of shifted cybersecurity and cyber insurance in today's business world?
I think from our perspective, it's definitely made it more complicated, because now we have the hackers have the capabilities to do like the voicemail fakes or the video fakes. Voicemail fakes are becoming more common, where they'll take, say, somebody at your organization that has some sort of authority, decision-making authority. They get their voice could be from a conference they went to or whatever, and then they'll call up and do a voice message, or actually have a conversation with somebody at the company, and they're using that person's voice to match their own, to try to get companies to authorize payments. A common one, again, is wiring money, and instead of sounding like a stranger, it actually sounds like that person has that decision-making authority, it can be very confusing for the employees. So I definitely feel AI is definitely it's definitely added different layers of complexity to the cybersecurity world. So.
And also, AI can be used for bad, but it can be used for good too. They have AI tools and resources out there to predict and detect if there's some nefarious activities, being done on your company or your website, whatnot too, to be proactive to say, hey, there's an alert that pops up. So AI can be used for good, but unfortunately we got some nefarious,
Yeah, people have a lot of free time on their hands.
Money is usually the driver, so for sure. So, but yeah, just question a lot out there. Question emails if they look suspicious. Most likely they are.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Team Logic for being our sponsor today, and thank you to Eric and Mark for being here and kind of discussing cybersecurity and cyber insurance, and kind of how organizations and chamber members can protect themselves. I kind of want to end with one piece of advice that we talked about today, like what sticks out to you that you think organizations and employees should know to protect themselves and kind of just understand cybersecurity and what it looks like.
I would say from our perspective, it can be a little overwhelming if you don't know where to start, especially if you've never really had this before, had to do this before. So, I would just say you really need to understand from a business owner's perspective what your current state of your technology is, where your critical data is located at. And so we always would say, at a minimum, you should do an assessment. And you do a security assessment, and you can do a device assessment, and you can get an idea of what your current cybersecurity position is. And at least gives you a starting point at that point in time. Then you can say, okay, from this point on, we're going to do these things to improve. But at least you actually know at that point in time, this is where we're starting from. A lot of times we run into situations where that business they have no idea what their current cybersecurity posture or position is. And that's the first thing we would do then, is try to get that assessment done and try to say, this is where your starting point's at. It's not perfect, but hey, at least we know where we're at now. And now from this point forward, we're going to do things to improve you and to improve your cybersecurity posture to help minimize any chances of cyber attacks going forward. So
It's a great piece of advice. Mark?
Besides the assessment, which is really good step one as well too, is, investigate, call, don't just rely upon, a single agent point of contact. Get to know agents that might specialize in cyber insurance. And it's not just a policy transaction, get educated from that point of contact, from that agent's representative, to learn a little bit more about what coverage you have and what's the difference between the different policies, and have them explain to you, if I bolted onto my general liability, what does it cover? It may just cover ransomware. What about the other 17 coverages that I might need? You just never know. And so, having a standalone, separate, robust cyber liability is the best course of action if you're wanting to protect the financial balance sheet. And I think it's one of your, top coverages, because it can render your company, hamstrung for, indefinitely.